Hello and welcome to the new book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinski and I will be your host on this adventure. Today is April 7th, the year 2021. We're talking about issues in the news and looking at them from a Patriot's perspective, as is my custom. First thing I wanted to start off with today is an article at uncoverdc.com from our writer Wendy Strock-Mahoney, who did a news piece on some people crossing the border illegally. That's the southern border of America, illegally, and they are not exactly of Southern American descent. We have two Yemeni men, people from Yemen, who were apprehended illegally, one on the 29th and one on the 30th, down along the El Centro processing section. One man was 33, one man was 26, and both of them, this is the key, both of them on the FBI terrorism watch list, and both of them on the no-fly list. And here they are walking into the country, expecting to be treated like one of Joe Biden's special honored guests. Steve Bannon, on his War Room podcast, interviewed a journalist and national security expert, Todd Bensman, author of a book published in February called America's Covert Border War, the untold story of the nation's battle to prevent jihadist infiltration. Interesting title. You'd think the guy's an expert, been doing this for a long time. He tells Bannon that there's a high bar of danger to get on the no-fly list. It's bad enough just to get on the watch list, but it's really bad. You have to be really someone not good to end up on the no-fly list. Big red alert. He says, ring the bell, 5-alarm national security fire, quote unquote. Interestingly enough, as news about this began to spread, well, the Border Patrol folks took down the press releases about these two guys getting apprehended. Bensman says he does not know why they removed the press releases. He says, my guess is that the Democrats and liberal activists have put tremendous pressure and energy into squelching the narrative that there's a problem with jihadists crossing the border. You think? Maybe you remember in the news last month when Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy went down to the border, and he came back with reports that 3 Yemenis had crossed the border who were on the terror watch list. And of course, the Washington Post and the Voice of America and all the left-leaning rags out there jumped on him, called him a liar because he had no proof, right? It's because the Border Patrol took down their press releases, didn't notify them, but he knew what was going on. He reported it. It's all part of the, shall we say, Joe Biden effort. I'm sorry, Joe Biden's just the puppet. It's all part of the Marxist effort to bring people into this country to cause chaos because they have pre-established solutions for the chaos that they want to implement after the chaos gets going. That's how the Marxists work. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. You create a problem, you make everybody afraid, and then you have a solution to the problem, except that the solution's already been decided. So maybe you could actually put it in order this way. Create a solution, create the problem, wait till everybody gets all worked up about it, and then bring out your solution, which is what the Marxists have been doing for years. And that's what they're doing at the border too. So President Trump threw a wrench in their plans. They had to have a election party thing happen on November 3rd to get Trump out because that was, shall we say, Joey Biden is an installed president, not an elected president. Well, anyways, I was guest hosting the Alan Key show earlier today, and I was talking about some of these things, and I thought, I need to talk about these on my podcast too. We have this thing in this country called critical race theory. Critical race theory, where everybody is of color is a victim. I know, because when I was getting through my doctoral work, had a professor sit down and explain to me critical race theory. This was back in, 15 years ago. And she's telling me that critical race theory is a valid form of research. And I'm going, really? Tell me more, because it didn't make sense to me. She was explaining that you look at everything through the person of color's eyes, and you see what the world is like to see the world from them. And it's nothing quantitative in their research. It's all qualitative research. But basically, to ask me to sum it up, it's looking at things as if you were a victim. That, in a nutshell, sums up critical race theory. You look at the world as if you're a victim and how everybody's trying to oppress you. That pretty much sums it up. So it's been affecting our schools. It's been affecting decisions that get made at the state level and at the national level and even at the local level. Well, like I said, we had this little election party that happened on November 3rd. And there's this whole thing about, do you have IDs? Do you not have IDs? And of course, the COVID issue. When you've got a solution ready to go, you create the problem. Problem is we have a bug. Nobody should go to the polls so that we don't overwhelm the hospitals, although it was for the health, probably for the children. And then we have nobody showing an ID to everybody's vote by mail, blah, blah, blah. Ballots getting, well, I don't want to go there too far because I don't need another strike on YouTube. But suffice it to say that Georgia this past week passed the law saying you need to have voter ID to vote, and other things that went in there too. And Joey Biden, our installed president, didn't like that. And for the first time in American history, we have a United States president who has called for an economic boycott, for economic sanctions to be held against a member state of this nation. Go figure. Never happened before. So Mariel Hemingway over at The Federalist had someone write in with some questions, and I thought these are great questions. Let's talk about them a little bit and maybe ask them as if we're asking Joe. So here's the first question. Seeing that over the past year, almost 50% of small Black-owned businesses in America have closed for good, and seeing how African Americans make up 55% of Atlanta and 54% of Havana and 55% of Augusta, does President Biden still think calling an economic boycott and punishment of private companies on all of Georgia is a good idea? Great question. Glad you asked, people. And will he now call for boycotts on the Masters, which is held in Augusta, the Atlanta Braves and the Atlanta Falcons and other sports teams in Georgia? Just asking, Joe, what do you think? Should we call for that? And just all those, got more than half the businesses there in Georgia that are owned by Black people have been shut down. That's nice, Joe, that you would do that to those people. Next question. Does Joe Biden keep a list of other places, other states, and other local legislation that he does not approve of? And over the next few years, if any of that legislation happens to pass and is signed into law, will he always publicly call for a boycott if he decides that their legal legislation is not according to his will? Great question. Next one. Should state and local municipalities start giving briefings and asking Joe Biden in advance if the legislation that they're considering will be approved by him so they can avoid the economic sanctions on the state? Hurt the entire state's population. The major newspaper in Atlanta, which is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, even offered some information and defended the move, this as SB 202, this legislation that passed in Georgia. Says the law made some changes to early voting, but experts say that the net effect was to expand the opportunities to vote for most Georgians. With this knowledge, will President Biden immediately ask Major League Baseball to reverse their decision to pull out the All-Star game and take it to Denver? Because, as we just looked at, here we have Atlanta that has, 55% Black population. Denver has maybe 10%. So who are you really hurting there, Joe? Major League Baseball? Who's the issue really against? Virtue signaling, pandering, blah, blah. Next question. What percentage of African Americans in Georgia do not have a voter ID? In fact, for that matter, same question goes for all the African Americans in the United States. You know what's hilarious? I think Will Witt is the guy that did this. You can probably find his videos. Maybe they've taken them down on YouTube. Who knows? But he went around and he interviewed white liberals. And he said, is voter ID racist? And these liberals are going, oh, yes, very racist. some of these black people don't know how to get IDs, and it's if you need to require an ID to vote, then that's racist. That's disenfranchising these voters. Well, in the same video, Will Witt then goes to black people, and he says, "Do you have an ID?" And they go, "Well, yeah, of course." "Does your family have an ID?" "Yes, everybody in my family has an ID." "Do you know any black people who don't have an ID?" "No, everybody has an ID." So in essence, these white liberals and now these organizations like Major League Baseball and Delta Airlines and United Airlines and everybody who's criticizing and following through on Uncle Joey's admonition to economically harm the state of Georgia, they all think that black people are too stupid to know how to get an ID. How racist can you get? White people who run Major League Baseball and black people who run how racist do you have to be to believe that people are too stupid to figure out how to get an ID? Do you know anybody over the age of 18 who does not have an ID? Oh, crickets. Everybody over 18 that I know of has an ID. It is not hard. So to insinuate that black people don't know how to get an ID, that in itself is a racist thought. Have you realized that you need an ID just to get a COVID shot? Now, I happen to not recommend people get that thing that they call a vaccine. And I just lost my screens. And I think I lost my whole computer. Are we gone? I think I'm gone. Well, it looks like I'm gone. I will take a look and check my other screens to see if I'm gone. I don't think that I'm operating live anymore. I think that Facebook decided to kill they spiked I'm guessing they spiked me. Just a guess. Yep, I don't see it. Wow. That's interesting. Nope, I'm back. All right. Here it is. Cool. All right. Well, that was weird because my whole computer, everything just went black. Everything shut down. It showed me like the dead screen of a reboot. And now I'm back. Thanks, George, for letting me know that you can still hear me. Good. That's nuts. Here I'm figuring that the people who run the NSA figured I was just getting a little bit under their skin. Well, let's get back to my my notes here. Gosh, where did my show notes go? That closed down. Let me go pull that back up. I was talking about getting an ID, wasn't I? That's funky. These strange things happen when you're doing live broadcasts. All right, here we go. There it is. There's my notes. I was on some kind of rant. All right. Oh, I was doing my last question talking about COVID shots. I do not recommend people get them. Of course, if you choose to, by all means do. But I recommend people don't. My last question that I want to ask here from the Hemingway piece over at the Federalist was, does this boycott of Georgia move Biden along to his goal of unifying the country? What a great question. What a great question. All right. Let's move on to my next story. The Federalist also has a story by Joy Pullman. She says, everybody knows why Democrats don't want voters to show ID. It has nothing to do with racism, and everyone knows it. So why are we playing this stupid game? And she goes on to say that, you know what we should do? Because you're going to get called a racist no matter what you do when it comes to voter ID. States should enact very strict voter ID laws because it doesn't matter. You're going to get called a racist anyways. And if you're going to boycott one state and all states invoke a voter ID mandatory law, well, then what are you going to boycott all 50 states? Well, that's going to happen. So anyways, it'd be a great opportunity, I think, to make sure that you invoke all fantastic, strong voter ID laws. Let me close this topic out by talking that made the former commissioner of Major League Baseball, Fay Vincent, wrote an article, an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. And in that, he said that the new commissioner, Rob Manfred, was wrong to pull the All-Star game out of Georgia. He said Major League Baseball cannot become a weapon in the culture wars, a hostage for one political party or ideology. In his article, he also mentioned that, baseball is a sport, an activity that unites Americans. And we had racism in baseball back prior to the 1950s, but that got fixed. And now, it's a unifying force, but no, now we're going to divide this stuff up. In fact, I just saw a photo earlier today of Major League Baseball. They got that little logo, the red, white, and blue logo, the guy with the bat and the ball. And instead of saying MLB, it said BLM. And I was just like, I can't believe this. Really? Do these people not know that BLM is in essence a front group for Marxist fundraising, that all the money, the millions and perhaps billions of dollars that got sent there basically went to the Marxists, to the Democrat Party, yada, yada. Well, let's continue looking a little bit at this critical race theory. In Portland, Oregon, there was a high school formerly known as Woodrow Wilson High School, now being called the Ida, the Ida B. Wells Barrett Barnett High School. Ida B. Wells was born a slave, 1862, and was freed and became the editor of a newspaper in Tennessee. And she was a strong advocate to stand up for blacks. I read that she was also part of the founding of the NAACP, and just a stand-up individual. And so they want to change this high school from Woodrow Wilson High School to Ida B. Wells High School, which I think is a great idea, actually, because Woodrow Wilson was, in fact, a racist. And so I don't mind taking his name off of a high school. This is a guy who was elected president because you had two Republicans. Teddy Roosevelt couldn't get enough of his ego, so he wanted to get back in. He split the Republican vote, and Wilson got elected. If Teddy Roosevelt had just put his ego in check and gone on and done something else, we would not have so many problems in this country that we do today. Anyways, Wilson resegregated the federal government. It was starting to get integrated. Black federal workers were fired under Wilson. Those that remained had to have separate bathrooms, separate lunchrooms, separate workspaces. There was supposed to be, it was very custom to have a black ambassador to Haiti and a black ambassador to the Dominican Republic. Wilson refused to put black people in those positions. He called the Ku Klux Klan the Great Ku Klux Klan. So yes, let's please replace him with Ida B. Wells. The same way that I'm all for replacing Andrew Jackson on the 20 with Harriet Tubman. That is actually a great idea. Harriet Tubman put her life on the line for this country, and she helped this country in so many ways. And Andrew Jackson was also a racist when you read up on his philosophies. So anyways, I digress. Ida B. Wells High School needs a new mascot. They had a Trojan mascot. That wasn't going to work anymore. So they started looking for a new mascot. Someone comes up with the idea of a pine tree, an evergreen. Evergreens are characterized by their life-giving force. of their foliage, their strength of their massive trunk, and the depths of their roots. It's an individual tree as a forest of trees, says Ellen Whitmore, a teacher and a mascot committee member at the Wells Barnett High School, which she read from a resolution. And she says she's just promoting the idea of having this evergreen tree as a mascot for Ida B. Wells High School. Well, the director of the Portland School Board, Miss Michelle DePass, said that she shared community concerns that an unwanted correlation between a tree and Ida B. Wells could be lynching, because a tree could conjure up reminders of hanging people with ropes from branches. Yeah, she said that. When you look at a pine tree, is the first thing that you think of lynching? I don't think so. I don't know anybody who looks at a pine tree. White, black, yellow, brown. Jesus just forgot to write it down. You know, whatever color you might be, I don't think anybody looks at a pine tree, at an evergreen tree, and thinks, oh, gee, what a great tree for lynching somebody. That's not what comes to people's mind. And yet, that is what Miss Sharon DePass, at the director of the public schools there in Portland, wants us to consider. Oh my gosh. What critical race theory is done to the thinking in this country? Remember I said it's thinking of everything as a victim? When you look at everything, you think of being a victim. That's what it does when you are getting just bombarded with critical race theory. Everything you see is a victim. I'm a victim. I'm a victim. Well, you know, Trump was trying to throw a wrench in that. He did a very good job of throwing a wrench into that. Trump made some huge mistakes, by the way. And we were having this conversation last night. A couple of us were sitting together talking, three of us. And, you know, Ronald Reagan made a mistake. He was the first president in a long time who was not a member of a globalist organization. The problem was he surrounded himself with people who were. And they basically were able to undo much of what he wanted to do. Trump made the same mistake. He was even warned, don't bring the deep state in. He was even calling out, we're going to drain the swamp. And yet he surrounded himself with people who defended the swamp. Trump needed to do much different than what he did. And if he ever gets into office again, I've got some strong advice for him. In fact, I will even work for him for free if he wants to bring me on to help make sure that all of his people, his staff, are patriots, people who want to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, not bring in critical theory and Marxist thought. Well, in Portland last year, you may recall they had all these picnics on the street, remember? Picnics with Molotov cocktails and baseball bats and things to break glass and bricks, right? And they tried bombing buildings, and they tried to barricade police inside of buildings. They were little picnics, right? The summer of love. Yeah, way cool. Poppycock. These were violent rioters who ravaged Portland for months last year. And one of them shot and killed in cold blood a Trump supporter who was part of Patriot prayer. For no reason, totally unprovoked, shot and killed the guy right in downtown Portland. Well, the feds came in because the Portland police were told to stand down. The Portland police were told they couldn't use tear gas. The Portland police were basically told to stand down and just do nothing, let all this happen. The summer of love just happened. Well, the Federals came in and they found this guy. They identified who did it. And when they went to arrest him, he ended up getting shot, ended up getting killed. His name was Michael Rhinoel, I believe is how you pronounce that. So Governor Kate Brown was on some talk show. She's being interviewed, and she's asking the interviewer is asking Governor Brown if she wants to condemn Reinhold's murderous actions. She wants to investigate the feds while refusing and never mentioning Reinhold's murderous actions as a piece of, as I'm writing here. And what does Governor Brown say? Shame on Donald Trump. Shame on him. Why? Because he threw a wrench in their Marxist plans. That's why. They are doing everything they can to keep shaming his name, to keep trying to smear him every chance they get, and his supporters. In fact, the title of this piece is that failed Oregon governor vows to eradicate Trump forces. I believe this is the what website is this? I'll tell you in a second. It is the Gateway Pundit. Thank you very much. And so she's getting interviewed, and she says, Trump did all this, and Trump this, and Trump shamed this, and the actions of the Trump administration were abysmal and absolutely abhorrent in this state. We worked with our local law enforcement to eradicate these forces. She's talking about how they pushed the feds out. Never mind that they're trying to barricade these people in the police departments and in the federal buildings and then burn those buildings down. Then the interviewer says, do you condemn the death squad style assassination of this man? Have you called for an investigation? So she's talking the death squad style assassination of this guy, the guy who shot and murdered somebody from Patriot Prayer for no reason. He gets shot by the feds, and that's a death style squad assassination. This is called gaslighting to the nth degree. Nth degree gaslighting. You can watch it on TV. You can watch the video. You can see the fire. You can see the flames. You can see the glass being broke. And then you can watch Governor Kate Brown say, these are peaceful protests where they're just asking for change. And you're supposed to believe her? She says, look, what happened last summer was abhorrent. We are continuing to work to hold federal officials accountable. I expect to see changes in leadership at the local federal level here in Oregon. And we are glad to be rid of Donald Trump's corruption, chaos, and incompetent government. Governor Kate Brown, I direct this to you. You are full of baloney. I'll be polite. You're full of baloney. You lie, you gaslight, you mislead, and you, ma'am, are going to be part of what tries to bring in Marxism into this country. You're a big part of it. And you know what's happening in Portland as a result? The police officers are now resigning or retiring in record numbers. Yeah. Citing hostile political climate, and incompetency from city leaders. 115 officers have left in the last year alone. Less the past 9 months alone. Unreal. An exit review. So you do an exit interview. As they're doing these exit interviews with former officers, broad dissatisfaction with the way that the law enforcement is being treated by the city. Think about that for a second. Do you want to wake up every day and go to work where you have to put on a bulletproof vest and have the city tell you you can't defend yourself when people are throwing Molotov cocktails at you and bricks and throwing stuff at you, and you're supposed to stand there and not do anything? Do you want to work in that environment? Do you want people spray painting your car and throwing rocks at your car? Do you want them burning your work car? Who wants to work in an environment like that? I can't see much joy in that. So I have no reason to doubt why people are leaving in great numbers. All right, let's wrap up the show by talking a little bit about what happened in Arkansas, because part of this whole critical theory, division of our country, has to do with dividing us not just by race, but also by gender and also by perceived gender. When you have the LGBTQ crowd out there who are demanding that you cannot convince or have any kind of therapy for anybody who wants to change their sex. You can't do that. I got news for you. I sat last week and watched a very emotional video from probably 24 people who had gone through sex change operations because they were sexually confused as a teen. And they were deeply regretting their choice. And they were very angry that nobody would let them talk to a therapist. Nobody could let them talk things through. Once they had any indication whatsoever that they were quote unquote gay or the wrong gender, they were born in the wrong gender body, whatever, then that was the path that everybody seemed to force them down. And they felt social pressure to go there. I just read something last week. Less than 1%, 20 years ago, less than 1% of our nation was considered quote unquote trans. And yet today, in some areas of the country, that's 20% of the people are now considering themselves trans. That doesn't happen through natural things. That happens through social pressure, just as the video I just described to you. There's this huge social pressure. My daughter is 18 years old. She goes to events, and one of the first things that she gets asked when she goes there, and she tells me these things, is it's almost girls at first. So are you bi? Are you going to be trans? Are you what are you? Are you queer? You know, when I went through high school, that was never a question we talked about. Never. And what I read last week, 20 years ago, that didn't happen. This is all social pressure. And people think that they have to be cool by being whatever these terms are. So they get socially pressured into these sex change operations, right? Well, this same kind of common sense, thank God, has gone to the state of Arkansas, where the state house and the state senate passed legislation that would prevent anybody from being referred to transgender hormone therapies or mutilating gender-changing surgery, where they remove the male part and they invert it and they turn it into a female part, and they can manufacture male parts and put them on females. This was make it against the law for that to happen if you're under 18 in Arkansas. Because of these testimonies of these adults, now adults, who were crying out for help in their teens, but they got forced down these paths. And believe me, these doctors who do these operations make a lot of money doing it. Anyways, our wonderful, the assistant chairman of the National Governors Association, Governor Ada Hutchinson of Arkansas, he vetoed their legislation. He thinks it's okay for teens to have gender mutilation surgery, to receive transgender hormone therapy. Well, I really like what the legislature in Arkansas did, because the bill bounced off the governor's desk. Of course, if you know anything about the Constitution, the legislature can override a veto. So it bounced back to the House. At 1:26 yesterday afternoon, the House voted to override the veto. And then they passed it on to the Senate. 45 minutes later, the Senate overrode the governor's veto. I love that. In 45 minutes on the same day, both houses said, yeah, screw you, Governor. This is not right. What's really scary to me is that Ada Hutchinson is the vice chair of the National Governors Association. Andrew Cuomo is the chair. The National Governors Association is leading the way on a lot of this critical theory implementation. The National Governors Association is leading the way on much of the lockdown nonsense that each of these states is experiencing. You hear about it for the safety of everybody, but when you go to the National Governors Association and you read what's going on, and you go back in time, and I'm going to be writing a story on this soon, so watch for it at Uncover DC. Be writing a story exposing how the NGA, the National Governors Association, is actually in partnership with the World Economic Forum. And the World Economic Forum is in bed with the World Health Organization and the globalists and the deep state, and you name it, they're all part of that same, call it a cabal if you want. It's dangerous. So I close with this. We have this guy named Barack Obama in this country. Some of you may have heard of him. The guy has an ego the size of a continent. He decided to tell us several days before his election that he was going to fundamentally transform the United States of America. Well, before that, Mr. Obama was a community organizer. Huge ego. Why would somebody with that big of an ego become a community organizer? That's because he knew that power is at the grassroots. The school boards, the precinct committeeman positions, every voting precinct in this country has an elected position known as a precinct committeeman. And it's those people who decide who the chairs are going to be for the county political party. And they decide who the chair is going to be for the state political party. And how did, in the past 40 years, did the Democrat Party go from being pretty much pro-American, just with some social and maybe some fiscal liberal policies, to becoming all-out Marxists, to where they've taken over the Democrat Party in Nevada? They're not all socialists down there. Because that's what Obama did as a community organizer. And he wasn't the only one. He just happened to be the biggest name. Well, I'm going to encourage you to look up conservatives of : go to conservatives of. There's no space. It's just conservatives of, no space, and then a colon, and look up your state. You can do that on Facebook, any social media platform, and get involved. Because just what Obama did on the left, moving the Democrats to the left, conservatives of is only going to support candidates that espouse Judeo-Christian values, the values that were used when this country was created, the values that were in place that make this country great. And so just because somebody has an R after their name does not mean they're going to get a support from the conservatives of people. You can get involved. You can get involved at the school board levels to stop all this Common Core. Oh my gosh, Common Core is horrible. The more I learn about it, the Marxists have so much information on you that you don't even know about. And the precinct committeeman. That's the grassroots right there. That's where you get plugged in. And then you start making an impact in your city governments and start getting conservative candidates, proven conservatives, elected to office. And you move that party more to the way that this country was when it founded. And we can make a difference. I'll leave you with that. This is Daniel Bobinski with the New Book of Daniel podcast. I thank you very much for listening. You can catch my writings at uncoverdc.com. And also now, if you happen to live in Idaho, go ahead and visit trueidahonews.com. Trueidahonews.com is going to kind of correct the spin. When you see all the falsity and the smears against conservatives in the mainstream, quote unquote, media, what we call the legacy media, well, True Idaho News is going to correct that. You can also follow me on Facebook / New Book of Daniel. You can also do that on Gab and on MeWe. Twitter decided I was a little bit too much of an advocate for the truth, so they kind of kicked me off. You can contact me through any of those social media platforms. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube still, you can go ahead and click that subscribe button and then click the little bell. And then you get notified when I upload new podcasts, which is usually about once a week or so. Anyways, I thank you very much for watching. This is Daniel Bobinski, and I will catch you on the next show. Until the next time, be blessed.